I cracked my office doors just slightly, and I looked over, and one of our dogs is just looking with the biggest puppy eyes, like, "What? Please let me in. Why can't I come in?" Sorry, sweetheart. You can come in. There you go. All right. We can't actually have closed doors in my house because we have animals that are incensed by that. Hello, everyone. Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer boards, recorder videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Go lie down. Welcome to the, what day is this today? Shit. Thursday edition of my bi-weekly behind-the-scenes DM only live stream. You think I know the difference because one of mine do at night and one during the day. That's a pretty good clue. DM only live stream Crafting the Deep, which I build right and prepare for our next session of Call from the Deep. If you are playing characters Gottwald, Max Sabra, or Toril, this is not meant for you, but for the rest of you, of course, you're very welcome. If you don't mind the spoilers, we stream our D&D sessions live on YouTube every Friday. You can join our official Discord server with invite link in the description below. If you'd like to support the channel, please check out patreon.com/RogueWatson. For our campaign, we use Roll20 for streaming. I do. God damn it. OBS Studio, you know the drill. Jesus. Hello, folks. Hope everybody is having a good one. I'm still so stressed from dealing with backyard renovation stuff. I've met with so many contractors. I know so much information now about everything. Hopefully we can start get that going relatively quickly. Right now we're going to be working on Call from the Deep, the Pirates Skyhold Earth Moat section, which is a somewhat homebrewed, somewhat kind of expansion from the book, which is, you know, built off of like a paragraph, and I just wanted to run with it, so that's what we're doing. We spent one session in the village proper. We've pretty much completed that section, and now we're kind of preparing for the Stronghold, which is where the undead pirates, led by Captain Blackdagger, have holed up inside of, and the party will have to fight their way inside. This is not going to be a social scene like it was in the Swamp Village. Instead, we're going to go pure warfare here. We've got a slight puzzle thing going on in room number 6. I think it's going to be just a word puzzle where they have to remember the name of the ship, which I think I have put in their quest log. Yes, right there. Boom. So you can't even blame me. Like, what was the name of it? Like, hey, you guys can look up that information on your in-game quest log. And then we're going to start breaking down what's going to happen as they approach, which I'm not drunk. It's only 11 a.m. here. That would be scandalous. Scandalicious. Starting with this area 8, which I've labeled on the mountain path. By the way, this map is courtesy of Seafoot Games. I believe it's included in the description. If it's not, it's in the description of the main session, but I think I put it in the crafting sessions as well. Called Swamp Village Ruins, I think. I don't remember the quite name of it, but a really, really cool map that I've been utilizing for the Earth mode because it's perfect. I got a swamp village and a fortress on one side. Like, I can't believe I can do this all in one map. Absolutely amazing. Now, this is going to be a purely hostile location full of enemies. They've actually fought a lot of these enemies already with the Aboleth scene, and just using more skeleton stat blocks, really. I think the skeleton stat block is pretty versatile, frankly. You know, it's got, it's a low-level shock troop, but that means it's perfect to use as a minion when the party is, what are they, 6th level right now? So they don't have multi-attack, so pretty easy to run. Just a short sword and a short bow. They've all got built-in range attacks, which is great. They do have damage vulnerability to bludgeoning, which mainly makes Gottwald, I think, do a lot more damage. I don't think anybody else really does bludgeoning damage. But of course, he has to be in melee to do that. But pretty relatively low AC and hit points. They should be able to go down pretty quick, which means I don't feel bad about using 20 skeletons that are currently reside inside of this fortress. And I will feature them in waves once the party actually makes it in. So there's 2 possibilities that could happen here, right? One of them is the party does what I think they're going to do and just assaults this fortress head on because they're just going up here. They don't know, you know, that it's full of hostile enemies. And then once they reach this point here, which is this mountain path, in fact, we're going to zoom out a little bit so you can see kind of the full context. So basically they'll be going east, they'll hit up this tower, they'll continue going east, and then north is kind of a mountain path that winds up this most elevated position, which is where the fortress resides. So this is a choke point right here. We call this a kill box. And this is where I'm going to start unleashing the attack from the undead pirates because they are on alert. Now they cannot leave the fortress. Their curse has bound them to this fortress, and they cannot leave unless commanded to by the Black Dragon. So in that case, but they're still on alert. Like they're all hostile, and they will defend the fortress unless somebody has been invited there by the Black Dragon, which is how people are able to make these kind of connections and things. Which I do need to include a bit about how the Black Dragon will just mention that fact. I guess they don't really need that information for anybody else. I think they've teased it from one of the NPCs I had in the Swamp Village. Were like, oh yeah, other people come and go from the fortress and rarely actually stop by in the village. And one thing I was wanting to look at, which we talked about last on Monday's crafting, was this catapult that could somehow be a little bit more flavorful than just launching, rocks and stones. So, I wanted some kind of cool siege weapon that the players had to deal with as they assaulted this castle. It just felt more interesting. Now, since they're all cursed and controlled by a Black Dragon, I thought, well, let's do something with acid then. And then we started talking about what can we do with different, acid spell effects. Shout out to Refus, by the way, who had some fun ideas with using like green slime and everything. I think what I've been settling on is the vitriolic sphere spell, which is a little bit high level, so I'll probably have to scale it down. But the description is kind of exactly what I'm looking for, which is an explosion of acid. So vitriolic sphere, you point at a location within range, and a glowing 1-foot diameter ball of emerald acid streaks there and explodes in a 20-foot radius sphere. Each creature in the area must make a dex save. On a failed save, a creature takes 10d4 acid damage and another 5d4 acid damage at the end of its next turn. So you've got an initial blast of acid, and then you still have that ongoing effect of acid, because I think that's what really makes acid. Besides just the damage type. On a successful save, a creature takes half the initial damage and none of the continual damage. I think it's just one. It's not an ongoing thing, but it is like a one, delayed damage that comes again. I really like that. However, we need to scale that down because I don't want to do the equivalent of a 4th level spell that I'm just lobbing at the players every time they make it up here. Now, we can give this thing good range, so it'll at least get an initial blast off. And also, I plan on using that as kind of a surprise round where I'm going to hide all this information on the map because they're on an elevated position. I think ultimately this tower is, I guess I need to decide on that, probably only 10 feet from, it's probably even with this wall, I guess. I don't know. And the wall's not 10 feet high either. So maybe it's like 10 feet from here, but that means from here, the south side, because it's on an elevated, and this path is winding up, it's probably 20 feet high. I think that's where I'm going initially. It's not a huge towering tower, but that still gives it the good height advantage. And I'm going to flavor it where the players aren't going to be able to really see that there's enemies in here. They're high up enough until this thing starts lobbing down, and then that'll be like the surprise round with maybe like a skeleton firing at them as well. Also, I looked up Mangonel on the Dungeon Master's Guide, and it says the damn things require like 6 or something actions to actually get off, which I thought was ridiculous. If I spelled that right, Mangonel. Yeah, so it takes 2 actions to load it, 2 actions to aim it, and 1 action to fire it. So it would take 5 people to be able to fire a Mangonel. I don't know if I can pronounce that properly. Pronounce a very southern Mangonel. In a single round, which seems ridiculous to me. So I think I'm going to cut that up and instead treat it more like a ballista, which I think is like 1 action to load, 1 to aim, and 1 to fire. That way we can have 4 skeletons up here. 3 of them can spend their actions every round, essentially operating the acidapult. And then one of them could just be firing down bow shots. And then if one of them dies, another one can take over operating that thing. Also, obviously, we can have it fire in the initial, surprise round thing. And then the other 2 would have to load it. I guess somebody's firing as part of the surprise round. And then when the initiative starts properly, then you've got to have somebody load, aim, and then by the 3rd action, they can fire it again. So that'll be kind of how I'll try to keep track of it during the round. I can give it a shorter range, maybe 100 feet instead of 150, because I want to nail them kind of right. I got to be wary of where my overlay is. Right here, kind of where the number 8 I've placed is. So, oh shoot, I've still got it on circle mode. Let's see. Line mode. So actually it's about 75 feet, so I'm kind of giving it less, but I really don't, 100 feet would be too much, I think. They would be, I feel like at around 75, 80 feet, that's when the players are like, okay, at this point we could be committed and charge forward, or we can back off. Which I would allow them to back off for sure, but maybe I'll limit the range to like 75 instead of 100. Also, I should have a rule. And mangonels also can't fire too close. I'll probably give it a thing where it can't actually fire within like maybe 30 feet. That would be too quick, which would be an interesting move for the players. Be like, okay, we need to just rush up and get as close to the tower as possible, which is definitely a strategy. And then the skeletons all have to switch to their bows. So that's another thing. So I may only get one attack with this. So partly I'm trying to figure out how much lower I want to. Yeah, we just talked about that, Nate. Minimum range. How much lower I want to scale this down, because I want to make it scary with the fact that I'm probably not going to get off more than 2 shots with the damn thing. Also, I did like the idea of leaving, which I have on the map, these cool little acid burst symbols where it can literally leave an acid puddle behind, which I think is also very thematic for acid. And then we can use the green slime rules, which I believe... again, shout out to Refas for pointing that out in the Discord. I think is 1d10. Yeah, creature comes in contact with the green slime, takes 1d10 acid damage. So that's pretty easy, right? It's just there. It just transforms that one little, and it's only that one 5-foot square. And also, I certainly would scale down the size of the vitriolic sphere, because as written, that is a giant, almost fireball size thing. We can go to circle mode, and you can see if I were to, what is a 20-foot radius sphere that says right now is that. That is enormous. That covers literally everybody in the area. That's actually a little too big from what I'm picturing how this thing be. So I'm probably going to at least cut it in half, I think. My initial thought was to literally just do a 5-foot radius, which sounds small, but then when you look at it on the map, you're like, okay, well, that's kind of like a thunder wave shape, right? That still covers 9 squares. Because if you do the 5 foot from a square and you go 5-foot radius, that means it hits every square adjacent to that square, so you're hitting that kind of 9 square pattern. Is that too small? I don't know. I guess it depends on how big I want the explosion to be. If we go 10, then it ends up hitting a much bigger radius. I guess you could argue either way. It's like 2 squares, almost more than that, because it looks like the way the map art works, but at least 2 squares would, from the point of impact, which would certainly hit the entire group, and then they could all like scatter and do whatever they want. So I could go either way with 5 or 10 squares. And then on damage, I'm probably at least going to lower it. I tested it out to 8d4 for the initial damage, which I believe has an average somewhere around 20 damage, I think. Or I could lower it to like 64, and that's an average of like 15 damage, but still keep the secondary damage, and I would lower that to probably equivalent to Tasha's Caustic Brew, which is a 2d4 acid, which is really not that much at all. That's if you fail to save, you take the initial damage, and then you take the ongoing damage just once at the end of its next turn. Or we could keep, I'll make it like 44 or something. I love this, all of this. Excellent. These are all my ideas. And again, we may only get 1 shot off, right? I think we have to, with the surprise round I plan on doing, it's going to be the initial burst to really make things exciting with this, like, oh shit, now this whole stronghold's come alive. Now, the other interesting thing is, no enemies are going to come pouring out of here. That's part of their curse. They cannot leave the fortress. So the party could, Mac's going to be back there and be like, well, look, I can just snipe these guys dead and kill them. That's a strategy they could do also. But meanwhile, I could, feature... I could try to have more skeletons run up here. I don't necessarily want to have that be a boring, like, okay, well, we'll take cover or run away, and then Mac will just sit there and snipe people. That's something they can do. But, skeletons can also shoot back at some point. In fact, I think the normal short bow has a normal range of 80 feet, so they could fire back as well. But they've got options. They can either fire from afar, deal with spells. Savra could cast a shatter spell. I could have that destroy the catapult or not. In fact, one shatter would probably destroy the whole bunch, which again is why I'm hoping to get that initial shot off and that big explosion. And then they could just destroy things as they see fit, because they still have plenty of spell slots left. I could have more skeletons run up here and add in there. We've got skeletons to spare. Or they could back off and try a stealthy approach as well, which I've kind of got some notes for that in terms of what the stealth checks are. Skeletons are not very perceptive, but they're in an elevated position. their whole thing is just standing guard over this thing. So I'm going to give them probably more like a DC 15, DC 10, depending on where they're trying to go. If they literally try to stealth up this way, that's going to be like a DC 20. Like, this is the main pathway, the choke point. Everybody, there's undead. They don't have to rest. Like, they're just constantly looking over here. Like, it seems next to impossible to stealth up here, just logic-wise, even though skeletons technically have a kind of a poor perception built in. But if you're smart about it and you try to, come up through the side or something, then I can lower the DC a bit. I can give them partial cover. Yeah, I don't think, Morgan, but between you and me, I don't really think it's going to matter much because skeletons do not have great AC. I think it's what is partials at best, like a +2 or something. You could give them 3/4. Wait, why isn't effect, line of sight, cover? No, this is not the right cover thing. Let's go to player's handbook for cover. There we go. So 3/4 cover is a +5 bonus to AC. That could actually make a pretty good difference right there, which they should have good cover, right? That's the whole point of being up there. So that is a good point. So I think, I've done this before. We can write on the map to remind my dumb ass. This is like the digital sticky note thing. So let's see. In like yellow. Let's see. That's not nearly big enough. We need bigger. 3/4. God, I can't type. Cover equals +5 AC, right? And I think it does, and to deck saves, which that could be a thing. It is covered by an obstacle, a portcullis, arrow slit, or thick tree trunk. Yeah, I definitely think they're gonna have 3/4 cover. Does sharpshooter fucking break that too? Sharpshooter, y'all. We haven't talked about the DM bans in a while, but sharpshooter is flippin' ridiculous. And I know I used it with one of my characters before. Yeah, ignores half cover and 3/4 cover. It's fucking insane. Any, like, one of these bullet points is almost worth a feat in of itself. Like, honestly, these two is worth a feat, right? Like, you have no disadvantage for long range, and you ignore half cover and 3/4 cover. That's great. And this one is also worth a feat. And the fact that it's just a flat +10, that's the one thing I would probably change, is that you take a minus penalty and a plus bonus. I would make those like die rolls. Maybe I would include like a -5, but then you get to add like a, I don't know, 1d10 or something to the damage. Like, it's crazy. It's so crazy. But yeah, that sucks. That, like, he literally constantly is like, nope, sharpshooter. Like, I ignore so many like restrictions on range attacks and then also do extra damage. It's crazy. I hope they do. I haven't seen folks use Lucky too often in our games, but I have seen Sharpshooter used, gosh, in a lot of our campaigns. And yeah, it's crazy. It just seems too much. It has too much for just one feat. So I am slightly salty about that, just because, like, at this point, the only thing I can do that fucks him up is water combat, which does fuck him up. And that is something that he struggles with in a very interesting way, which is a cool challenge to create. Is like, oh, you're underwater, like you just almost can't even straight up use a bow. I do have an idea to give him kind of like an underwater crossbow or something cool where he can actually use a weapon underwater. But anyway, yeah, so 3/4 cover equals +5 AC, which is great for skeletons. It makes our 13 and 18, but fortunately Mac doesn't care. So yeah, they'll have a little bit of cover. So for the final, we're looking at, let's see what's in my notes about this. DC 13 deck save is kind of what I'm looking at for the explosion whenever it lobs that barrel with the 5 foot, which again looks like that. No, I can't scroll down more. Looks like that for a 5 foot radius. Tunk. And then that makes that little puddle right there. I've got those on the GM layer ready to whip out. 4, I was going to go with 8d4 acid damage. Just make it almost as good as Vitriolic Sphere. On a failure, and then maybe 4d4 at the end of the next turn. Unless you have another creature uses an action to scrape or wash off the acid, which that's a good use for, cheese or the zombies or something. Zombies don't care about. Well, no, they do care about acid. It's poison they don't care about. But on a successful save, you only take half of that initial damage and then none of the ongoing. And it also leaves that little acid patch, which I don't think the acid patch is really going to matter too much at the end of the day, because there's not going to be any like knockbacks or anything these guys can do. And in fact, I'm sure Toril will try to knock people off of the parapet, which he can do, but then he will have to deal with the extra cover of shooting up into the thing. In fact, I could even impose disadvantage if I really wanted to get nasty about it and say, like, these guys have all, I mean, because that would be like a Baldur's Gate 3 thing, right? These guys have the height advantage and everything, and they literally have the high ground, so they would have advantage down there, and you guys would have disadvantage. I don't play around with that enough, probably, where it's like environmental effects granting advantage or disadvantage versus just like in-game powers and effects. So that could be something I'm looking at as well. Once they actually reach the main entrance, at that point, I did rule that they could just take a barrel of acid and roll it off and kind of treat that like one of those tipping cauldron things. Be able to pour one of those acid patches on the ground. Probably would not equate to the full effect, though, because it wouldn't really be the explosion. In fact, I could make the explosion. If it's literally a barrel, I could maybe do like 64 acid damage and like 2d6 bludgeoning damage or something. Or piercing damage, if it's like the barrel exploding and you have to deal with like shrapnel effects. So that could be, maybe it's not all acid. Maybe the acid effect is only 64. Although then it gets, like, do you make the save for both numbers put together? Like, it gets, is it really worth me having to change the numbers around? I don't know. Nobody really has those built-in resistance. Well, maybe they do. Maybe somebody's got a acid resistance potion or something. That would be the thing that they find in the strongholds. Like, hey, here's all the acid resistance armor. Like, damn it. Well, we needed that. I guess I need to number these guys too. And I do plan on staggering them. So initially, they're just basically going to be fighting these 4 skeletons, but 3 of them will be operating the acidopult. Once they make it up closer to the main entrance, or really within 80 feet of it, I guess I should say, which is by line of sight. So probably once they reach near the tower. In fact, really, it could be there. I wonder if I should put like a line up where you could start. Once they advance to this point here, because they have a range of 80, but the tower could block them there, but not there. South of it. And I mean, a range of 80. That's just without disadvantage. Which would be normal, I guess, right? If they're actually out of range, you could have these skeletons firing, especially if I want to give them advantage from the towers. Then if they're firing out of range, that would just impose a normal roll. So I could have multiple, which is only 2 skeletons right here, firing that whole time. So I could really be laying down the hurt. And that would be a pretty far range for the players to deal with. Although, again, Toril, pretty sure, are built for any long-range attacks. It'll be interesting. Hopefully it'll be a tactical challenge for them to determine how to basically assault a fortress that is on high alert and already hostile. I don't know if we've had a dungeon design quite like this. A lot of times when I introduce a dangerous castle situation, it's more heist-like. The players have a chance to like sneak in or talk their way in or do something, whereas here there's not really. I guess they do have a chance to sneak in, but that would probably come after the initial fight, and that would be them like retreating and then deciding to, sneak in a different path, which would be possible. They could try to, like I said, the best way to do it would be to sneak on this west side, have to deal with this poisonous swamp water. You could either sneak your way to get closer to the main entrance, which at least avoids probably the majority of the catapult attacks, or you could even sneak all the way to the back entrance, which would avoid all of that, assuming you can roll decent stealth checks, and make your way into this rear door, which they don't know that exists. So they don't have all that information at this point. Everything is got dynamic lighting, which is covering. I could do even more extreme dynamic lighting and block the actual hill, but I figure you should be able to at least see that there's a fortress up there, so I don't feel the need to do that. I did make some on the edge here, so hopefully that makes it look a little better, because you could, I guess one option they might try to do is to climb up this side of it so they can be more even. And then try to make your way inside from that side. I guess I haven't thought about that either. But if they do that, they're still at the mercy of the catapult, can still aim and hit them from there. So everything's got its advantages and disadvantages. Once they make it inside, they'll have to deal with the remainder of the skeletons, which I will try to space apart in waves. So not including the ones which are in towers, which are 6 right now, 4 in the south one and 2 in the northwest one, I guess. We've got 2, 4, 6, 8 available right now that would fight them basically as soon as they make it down to this door. Now this door is going to be reinforced. It's going to take like a DC 20 strength check to break down. I did have a rule in there where if they roll a 15 or higher, or 15 to 19, they would still break it down, but maybe they would take some damage in the process or something, to note that it like really wrenched your shoulder or something to tear it down. But it's going to be a pretty big reinforced door, and of course there'll be a bunch of skeletons waiting on their side. Right now I've got them like they're technically on normal alert, but once the attack happens, obviously there'll be more skeletons lined up in case they stealth, I guess. There'll be more lined up like at the walls and, you know, ready to rain down attacks and melee attacks and whatever. Now, how I separate the waves very much is going to change depending on how the fight's going, because, you know, I could have it be like round 1 this happens, round 2 this happens, but things will certainly change dynamically between how the party's doing, how the pacing is, just resource wise. Excuse me. I just felt a terrible tickle in the back of my throat. Not like I need to be talking right now. Oh my goodness. By the way, the weather around here has been crazy. It got to like, I don't know, 90s. What is happening to my voice right now? It got to be like 90s early this week, and then just dropped in temperature to where the low was like, I don't know, 40 or something. So like everybody's allergies and shit is crazy. The kids have been sniffling, like, just, you know, the little one had a rough night last night. Hopefully not actually catching anything. I'm just, this freaking allergy stuff is nuts. Excuse me, sorry. All right, the waves for the undead forces. So 8 skeletons initially attacking people as they bust their way through. Then I'm going to have it slightly delayed. We've got some enemies inside this little inner keep section where I'm going to put the captain and another 4 skeletons. And then we have the stairs, which I did find proper stair art going down. Although it's got kind of this background of like rubble, but whatever, the inside can be that rubble thing. With a Minotaur skeleton, which I loved the idea. I think it was Demnix from Monday's stream. 93 to 40. Yeah, I think it was something like that. Fucking crazy for late February. Along with another 2 skeletons. I love the idea of the Minotaur skeleton to deal with. Gottwald would be fantastic. Like, comes up and they just have like a charge off or something. And he can come up from below the swampy caverns as an additional wave. So wave, and the problem is I can't even do it like round 1, round 2, because round 1 is like them outside of the castle, like getting fired on, you know, from the acid pult. So I don't know what round we'll be on by the time we make it inside, but probably do at least 1 full round, after they've breached the castle doors. The round after that, again, give or take, we can have the Minotaur skeleton emerge, possibly with some extra skeletons, possibly not, depending on how many skeletons are left or if I need to add more or not. And then that'll be a cool like mini boss fight. And then emerging from the keep in another round, give or take, will be Captain Blackdagger with some more skeletons if the players haven't already tried to like rush in this keep and for whatever reason. So they haven't already been aggroed. Now that's a lot of forces, and the party has not gotten a chance to rest or anything with, again, 20 skeletons, a Minotaur skeleton, and a Revenant. That is a deadly, deadly encounter, even if I'm staggering them and having this unique situation of like, you know, you can fight some of them with the walls, but they've got siege weapon, and then once you make it inside, siege weapons don't really come into play, but you've got more of them to fight. But very importantly, this will not be a fight to the death, although certainly the players could end up killing everybody. I don't know. But instead, at some point, once the captain has engaged everybody, hopefully for at least a full round, then everybody will go slack, all the undead, and then probably the captain will raise his head, glowing eyes, and be like, And everybody will sheathe their weapons and point towards the stairs and be like, the master will see you now. Which I think is just going to be a really cool, badass move to do. Really teases the point that the dragon is not like some enemy waiting to be killed, but like a mob boss who's willing to have a meeting. And the players will be definitely on their back foot, having had to fight all of this. So I think that's going to be the way I'm going to treat it, and allows me to go a little bit harder in this scenario than I would if they had to actually... What do I have 2 of these vitriolic spheres? If I had to fight everything like a normal battle. So I think that's why I can get away with that. Also, the Revenant will not be able to use all of its Revenant abilities against the players. It has not sworn vengeance against them, so it won't be able to use Vengeful Glare or Vengeful Tracker, or its Fist will not have its extra thing on there as well. In fact, I'm just going to go ahead and delete this part of it, I think. I do like the idea that you can grapple people, though. It's pretty fun. More enemies should be able to do that. There we go. As part of the fist. So I might be able to have it do like a fist attack and then a scimitar. Although, I don't know how that works with Gottwald wanting to grapple others and then he being grappled. And I gave him a sword for whatever reason, because I figured he should have a little pirate cutlass. He does still have regeneration, though, and a shit ton of hit points, over 100 hit points, and multi-attack. So, 2 fist attacks. Just makes 2 attacks, whatever. So that's why we can go a little bit stronger with these enemies, and I do not expect them to take out Black Dagger. Previously, they were able to take him out, but he rarely attacked the party. He was focused on the Aboleth, and I believe he was at half health at the time. Does Skeletons take less damage from piercing, or was that a dream? That might be an older edition of D&D, but I do not believe they have any kind of damage resistance. No, it's just that they have the vulnerability to bludgeoning, and then they are immune, like all undead, to poison. But otherwise, they do not have resistances built in. Or maybe you're thinking of Pathfinder. Does Pathfinder do that, perhaps? It's a little bit more in the weeds with the... I kind of wish D&D would do that a little bit more often. Like, make it matter that, like, you have different weapons for different situations. We don't have to go, like, super Fire Emblem with it necessarily, where it's like, oh, my axe beats, you know, this guy's lance or something. But, you know, you've got those damage types built in. Why not use some more interesting, like, vulnerabilities and resistances? And yeah, it would totally make sense. Skeletons don't have skin or flesh or organs to pierce, so piercing maybe wouldn't do as much. You get a couple things, like the jellies. If you do, like, slashing damage to the jellies, they end up splitting, which is kind of fun, but I feel like there's very few and far between. So what do we think of this grand tactical combat? I'm hoping it's interesting for the players to deal with. I don't know how they're going to deal with it in terms of, do they just run headlong and try to take out people like a traditional combat encounter, which they can do that. I guess the only bummer boring thing would be if they just take out all these guys and then they just kind of cautiously make their way up here. But I will have these two be able to fire down. And technically I could have more of the skeletons inside run up to the tower and take over those duties. That could be something, and that's less skeletons that would be down, you know, in the base dealing with, or just being able to attack the players once they breach the doors. But I want to be careful about it, not just constantly replenish. What I don't want to do is create a situation where the players think there's just a never-ending tide of skeletons defending this fortress, so this must not be the way we go, because this is the way you go. There's just a lot of skeletons you have to deal with. And then in terms of the stairs going down and the dragon, I did have a map which was courtesy of Gabriel Picard's Vile Tile. What is it called? Oh, no, sorry. Save versus Cave Swamp Caves, which had some good swamp caves in there. And I don't think I'm going to use this as any kind of a proper dungeon. I think it's just going to be the Black Dragon's lair, so I don't need it to be very big. But in terms of maps, you know, it's fun to have a little map on there and show the dragon off and all that. And I don't know, maybe have a treasure pile to tantalize the PCs with fucking with them, which would not be a good idea. There's a couple different options. I could use a smaller map. Might actually go off better. This is one of the bigger ones that showcases a giant ship, like, on its side, which feels kind of thematic, but kind of, you know, you could be like, oh, that's one of the sky ships, you know, that was up here. But also, how did it get the fuck in here? There's no, like, good, big enough openings for it to go in here. So one of those like Goonies situations, I guess, where you find like a ship underground, but even that one had like a giant cove this that they could enter and exit. This one doesn't have um, really a big enough entrance for why this thing would be in here. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But the problem with this map is like, where do I put the dragon himself, right? Then I feel like the map needs to have like a central thing where the actual dragon hangs out. And I don't know if he would hang out in the swampy water or prefer to be on land. But you can see there's a couple different options on the right side of the screen as I'm scrolling through the different maps in terms of small caves and large caves. So I'm not necessarily committed. Like that's a good one right there. That's got kind of a central base. Although that map I might just be use a smaller cave map. I don't necessarily need to go because once the players are like invited, to go downstairs and talk to the dragon, there's no point in laying down more encounters or more traps or anything. I could still have some minions down there with the dragon. Undead pirates could be down there as well. In fact, that could be an excuse for like the Sword Wraith Warrior. Maybe use more of those stat blocks down there as his like personal guard or something. But I don't expect this to be a combat encounter, but still might be worth. Was that same map with a skeleton in there? That's kind of cool. Oh yeah, I can just do the same map without the ship if I wanted to use that one. I wonder how big this. I think the small ones are 15. Yeah, it's 15 by 15. Which might be bigger. Again, we only need this spot for the dragon. We could, and they all have usually two, entrance and exit. So you could always say like, oh, well, this cave continues on, but this is where the dragon just hangs out in this area. Do they actually have to go through the swampy water? Maybe not. Can they? Is there a map where they can be on land the whole time? Like that one, maybe? Also, I probably need the actual... Because I assume Call of Duty does not include a good Black Dragon picture. Or any... Is it under Garandar? Garandar the Bile. It is not. Okay, maybe it's Dragon, comma, Black. Oh, adult. There we go. Adult Black Dragon. Which, no, so I have to get the artwork for that. Which, again, I do not plan on having them fight this creature, but if they piss him off, then he will certainly get his various moves off. CR14. I'm actually going to delete you and grab an adult Black Dragon from the compendium. Yeah, how... Well, it's going to be like swamp water, right? So that's... Because I figure that's what the Black Dragon's all about. That's the picture I want. Which, are these guys huge or gargantuan? I think the adult's probably huge. Yeah, and the ancient one's gargantuan. It's funny that the main dragon we dealt with in Rime was an ancient fucking dragon. Well, that and the construct dragon, I suppose. Yeah, and I fear that it's... This is an interesting phenomenon, too. Because of the map size, the dragon doesn't actually look that big. So maybe this would not be the best map to use versus a smaller map, which might have the dragon look more big and imposing. Even though his lair wouldn't necessarily be tiny, but this is like a huge-ass open chamber. And there's just no good... It's a cool map. There's not a good central location to put the dragon, so I think I'm talking myself out of this map. If we use one of these smaller... We could use a big one and just cut it off. Because I did kind of like this one, which has a lot of different tunnels coming 2 and 4, and that would be swamp water everywhere, and then there would be like a pile. Let's see. So let's actually delete this one. And let's grab this one, which should fit right in. Could also turn it if we need to. And there's a felled log leading to the middle. But this one, you've got a kind of nice central platform for the dragon. I guess you could use any number of these entrances for the players to come in at. Would he have swamp? He would still need fresh water though, right? Like, makes sense that he would have some kind of. This would not be poisoned waters in here. In fact, the only bummer is okay. There's some on land. There we go. The south one and the west one. Uh, yeah, and then you could lead to water and lead to the dragon. Okay, this one might work. You could just leave it that big, but at least the central room feels a little bit better. And then just piles of coins and stuff, and then include some of those. Like the idea of maybe the skeletons, the sword wraith warriors. I don't know if I'll include any lizard folk up here. I kind of like the idea of the lizard folk, like, I don't know. I mean, coming and going, but staying in the village for the most part. Versus he's got these he's got the undead servants. Sword. Nope, I think I added it later. You can do a sword wraith commander, but that's what kind of stat block is that? CR8. They're not gonna fuck with this dragon. There's no way. Have you met your players? Yes. Yeah, maybe include like 2 of those, and then just the regular, some regular skeletons around the area. And then depending on which entrance, I could use the south one or I could use this west one, I guess. As long as it's initially a land one, and then they can cross into the water as supplicants approaching the dragon. But I plan on really doing some fun things with the role-playing of this dragon scene. Like I said, I think he's going to be infatuated with Savra because he's going to be a necromancer and really be into the necromancy thing. And just absolutely warm up to her instantly and allow a really fun social scene there. And he'll be actually pretty amenable. Even though they fought a lot of his shock troops, he doesn't give a shit because they're undead. And they can just discuss business. I do want to treat him like a powerful mob boss, but yeah, somebody who's also not quite like maybe smitten with her, but just very interested in her and her magic. And yeah, that can blossom from there, I guess, depending on how the players react to all this. But he'll be pretty forthcoming with the information about, you know, he has no loyalty to the people he met with, and he may even be annoyed with a, you know, maybe, well, I guess, let's see, he had to have, if he was hired by the Kraken Society to take out the Aboleth, so he must have known, he needs to be the one to point them where they go, so he must have known they were going to attack Neverwinter. But maybe he didn't know to the extent that Neverwinter was going to be assaulted and attacked. So maybe he's not necessarily worried, but like annoyed that in doing, he thought it was just going to be this one like strike force coming in. It's not like he doesn't care about, like, you know, he's a black dragon, so it's not like he's worried about, like, you know, bystanders and stuff in terms of where he points his crew. But I like the idea where he doesn't, you know, maybe as a mob boss, he doesn't want to like piss in his own pool and, like, you know, I live right next to Neverwinter, so it being attacked like this kind of puts a big target, and it's not good for business. You know, maybe he even like pulls a lot of the strings and runs a lot of stuff in Neverwinter that they don't know about, kind of like the Aboleth does, and likes it being, you know, this frontier city and things. But so I don't know, some kind of motivation where he would be willing to give up the people, but and probably extract a price from the players. You would expect like payment from them, maybe magic items or something. I could really try to crib something out of there, but also maybe he could even give something to Savra, like an old spell book or something with some spells in it, or some scrolls. I don't know if I want to give a straight up magic item, but I could also explore that possibility. What kind of cool layer environmental effects can the dragon do? That's a good question, Morgan. Let's see. I don't remember if that's actually... Okay, it is. Regional effects. It will definitely have layer actions as well, but I don't think we need to use any of those because we're not going to be in combat. Regional effects. The land takes longer to traverse. Swamps are thick with reeking mud. Plants grow thick and twisted. Water sources in the mile are supernaturally fouled, which I am doing that. Enemies of the dragon that drink such water regurgitate it within minutes. Although I'm going further and say that it's actually like poisonous. At least the water in the village. Fog lightly obscures the land. So It's just kind of, I feel like that would just be a creepy swamp in general. Nothing terribly supernatural going on there. I guess we could look at layer actions. Pools of water, surge outward in a grasping tide, a cloud of swarming insects. Fills a 20-foot radius sphere, lightly obscures and deals damage, or magical darkness spreads out. All those are pretty cool, but I don't think we need to use any of those. Black Dragon's lair is a dismal cave, grotto, or ruin that is at least partially flooded, providing pools where the dragon rests and where its victims can ferment. The lair is littered with acid-pitted bones of previous victims and the fly-ridden carcasses of fresh kills, watched over by crumbling statues. Centipedes, scorpions, and snakes infest the lair, which is filled with the stench of death and decay. Yeah. I think we're gonna nail that decently well here. Maybe not the insects and stuff so much, but I mean, there are insects everywhere. Could look at his actual horde, which doesn't actually include much for an adult black dragon. Bag of Holding, Spell Scroll of Blight. Blight would be actually a good one to give. Is Blight necromancy? Oh, that just links to Spell Scroll. Surely it's necromancy, right? I think it does necrotic damage. Yes, it is. 4th level, too. It's the one that's like just withering and decaying a single creature. Must make a con save. Take 8d8 necrotic damage on a failed save or half as much on a successful one. It really fucks up plant creatures. Disadvantage and the spell deals maximum damage to it. Yeah, brutal. I could see him awarding the, depending on how the role-playing scene goes, basically, he needs to give up the information about where Ned is, which he will give up that fairly willingly, because that's what I need to have happen to move the story forward. But any other things and how easily he gives up that information will determine, it was going to be based on how this role-playing scene goes. So he may ask for, treasure from the magic items, really be like, hey, what have you brought me? Kiss the royal finger and all this kind of stuff. And I will tell you this information that you seek. And the top end of this would be like, well, let's make a deal. We want to point your, we want to hire your guys, which is something I'm not necessarily prepared for. But it'd be like the Baldur's Gate equivalent of those items that like summon, NPC allies that you've earned. That you can just summon at some point would be like these undead crew. But that could be an interesting factor, and something I like from different RPGs. Dragon Age Origins, I think, does this pretty well, where you make, not only do you make friends along the way, but you ally with factions along the way. And then when you get to the finale, you can actually utilize those allied factions in your like final assault or whatever that situation is. So in this case, for example, they've already got the Aboleth on their team, although that was always kind of going to be a given, and they can call in the Aboleth whenever they finally reach or have found the location of the Kraken and the Mind Flayers. So that would be like one creature they can hit up. Maybe there's a way here, if they think of it. I probably will not offer it, but if they think of it and be like, well, can we, how much does it cost to hire out your crew for like a mission or a job? And can they point to any down? Now, they may try and do something like, well, can you just say, okay, go hunt Tentrix, and these guys will go hunt him, we can go follow him. And he's be like, that's not how this works. He has to basically, or does he have to know the target? Because they didn't know where the, how does it work then? Because he was able to target at the Aboleth. Did he know where the Aboleth was? Maybe Ned knew where the Aboleth was. And the dragon, maybe the dragon wasn't even aware there was an Aboleth there, and he's like, I'm the only like super predator who should be dealing with Neverwinter right now and Mastermind, and that's not cool. And maybe when they come in, he'll even be like, you stink of that creature or something, especially with Toril, and really be like, the only way they're even having this conversation is because he's interested in Saw her magic. So maybe Ned, which I'm replacing Orbeck in the story with Ned, told him about the Aboleth and be like, you need to take this guy out. Well, we'll still pay you. I don't think it's mentioned in the story how much. Just said Gander was contacted by someone named Orbeck who was seeking Tentrix. Now in the story it says he knows the Kraken Society has something to do with it, doesn't know why they want the Aboleth dead, only he'll be paid well for the use of his mercenaries. I don't think says how much he was paid, and surely he was paid up front for some of it at least. Yeah, I don't think it ever goes into it. I don't know, maybe he was given like 1,000 gold or something at least, bare minimum. I'll have to make these notes. I would be pretty surprised if we made it to the meeting with the Black Dragon in tomorrow's session. I think that the big stronghold battle and assault will certainly take up the rest of the session, and I would love, my ideal ending point is to end where everybody's just like, holy shit, how long is this fight going to go on? And then everybody goes slack and says the dragon will meet you now. That would be the perfect ending point, and where I'm going to try to end things if I can. But depending on how long we take, we may not even make it that far. We may have to end it like when the captain first, emerges and that fight continues or something. So we'll see. But I don't see us making it to this meeting yet. And then that allows us to not have to rush through this meeting at, the end of a session. Instead, we can do it during the next session, actually have a nice sit down chat with this dragon and go over everything. And then I'll have to start prepping for, okay, where is Ned? What is the situation there? Because we'll include that in probably towards next session. And then whether we can actually wrap everything up, I'm not sure. I think bare minimum it's going to take 2 sessions, which one is going to be finishing the entire surface of the Earth mode, I think, tomorrow. And then next time will be this Black Dragon scene, which should just be a dialogue scene. And then returning to Neverwinter to follow up with the location of Ned and how to take him down. I'm tempted to not make that some kind of a big dungeon crawl or location in terms of where he is. I don't know how the Black Dragon is going to know where he is. Maybe that's just something he keeps tabs on with everybody through his means. I don't know what other means he's got, but he's got his own agents or something in Neverwinter, which makes a lot of sense, especially if people want to meet with him. He's got people that work with him, work for him, I guess, stay down there and they get rewarded somehow. So maybe he's just got, he can just tell that information. Is like, yeah, I've been tracking this guy because, I don't know, just to see what they're up to and everything. And I know that he frequents this area, and really just treat it like a mob boss who knows connections and stuff, right? Like that's the whole thing about the mob bosses. They've got, not only do they have the power of minions, but they have a lot of information that the party needs. So somehow he's going to have to just know the approximate location of Ned, or at least which places he frequents. Maybe he's even hangs out back in Saltmarsh still, or it probably makes sense he's more in Neverwinter. And then we can go with I don't know, kind of a just tavern brawl / chase scene through the streets. Maybe it ends up at the docks or something. I could involve a little bit of things that aren't strictly a dungeon crawl, but would probably unfortunately require me to create yet another map to get all this done, or ideally, hopefully, find a map on the Roll20 Marketplace that's a reasonable facsimile that I need. So this is the problem I have thrust upon myself, right? And the thing is, I would have had to make some kind of maps even for all the stuff that's already in the story, because none of the maps are really any good. But I'm having to do all these, and we just came off of a big one that did a bunch of original content. So I'm really looking forward to when we get to running stuff from Ghost of Saltmarsh, because I will be ready to run like a ready-to-go dungeon that's, got the map and stuff in there. Like Final Enemy, I think, will be the next one that we do, because I'll place the styes a little bit further away. And once they finish with this section, they deal with Ned and they get the information from Ned, which will, lead them more to the main quest additions. Then they will level up to 7, and then from there they'll probably tackle the Final Enemy, just because I think that's gonna be the next place on their map. They'll level up to 8, and then I think they can do the styes at 9, which I think the styes is actually made for 9. Am I doing that right? No, let's see. 6. So they'll level up to, no, sorry. So this one is 6. They'll level up to 7. So there'll be 7 for Final Enemy. And then, which I forget what level that's actually made for. And then they'll level up to 8, and there'll be 8 for the styes. And then once they complete the styes, they'll be level 9 to go to Tentrix's lair and deal with the Nelanther Isles area. And there may be some other mini things that can do along the way as well. These little like mini dungeon crawls and encounters and stuff. And then probably be level 10 for Purple Rocks. And then it's kind of vague in terms of how much I want to level them up in going into Escarl or leveling up in the middle of Escarl. Like, it's kind of tricky when you have these mega dungeons, but they'll probably be normal, 11 or 12 by the end. So I think we're on track for the pacing, and I think that is going to do it for this crafting session. So if you enjoy the content, please check out patreon.com/Rogue Watson. Shouts to Platinum patrons Joe, Will, Thomas, Stan, Brennan, Zenicider, Eclectic, Roleplayer, Christopher, Corey, Big Nut, John F, John L, Eric, Tyler, Nathan, Camp Chris, Counselor, Andrew, Daryl, the Reldron, Captain Woody 79, Stephanie, Andy, Patrick, Jason, Ismail, Amit, Lumpy, Spuds, Coin, Sharny. Gold patrons RPG Papercrafts, Pretty Boy, and Yuma, Dead Lizard Lounge, Sam, Jerome, Nathan, Fast Like a Tortoise, Scott, Rufus, Caroline, Jerry, Thomas, Glenn, and Marcus. Thank you all very much for your support. I will see you for D&D tomorrow night.